Garrett Augustus Morgan was born on March 4, 1877, in the small town of Paris, Kentucky. His parents were formerly enslaved, and they lived during a time when opportunities for African Americans were very limited. Garrett's childhood was not filled with wealth or comfort. Instead, it was marked by poverty, struggle, and the constant reminder that life for a black child in the late 1800s would never be easy. Even as a boy, Garrett showed signs of curiosity. He loved to look at how things worked. He asked questions, he studied objects, and he often tried to take them apart just to see what was inside. This natural curiosity was one of his greatest gifts, but it was not something the world around him encouraged. In the South during this period, education for African American children was not a priority. Schools were poorly funded, and children were often expected to work instead of learn. Garrett managed to attend school for only a short time. By the 6th grade, his formal education ended. To many, this would have been the end of their chance at a brighter future. But Garrett Morgan was not like everyone else. Even without school, he refused to stop learning. He taught himself by observing, by experimenting, and by staying determined to grow. At the age of 14, Garrett made a bold decision. He left his family home and moved north, to Cleveland, Ohio. This move would change his life forever. In Cleveland, there were more opportunities for work, and Garrett quickly found jobs to support himself. He started as a handyman, doing basic repairs and tasks for people who needed help. It was hard work, but it gave him money to survive and, more importantly, it taught him skills. Garrett was fascinated with machines. One of his early jobs was repairing sewing machines, which were popular in homes and factories at the time. He became so skilled that he eventually opened his own repair shop. Imagine a young man, barely out of his teenage years, running his own small business in a new city. For someone who had only a 6th grade education, this was a remarkable achievement. In his workshop, Garrett's talent began to shine. He had a natural ability to see problems and create solutions. Sewing machines often broke down in complicated ways, but Garrett found creative methods to fix them. He studied the gears, the needles, and the small parts until he understood them better than anyone else. This skill, the ability to study, learn, and improve machines, was the foundation of his future as an inventor. But Garrett Morgan was not only thinking about machines. He also thought about people. He believed that inventions should help everyday life, not just make money. This belief guided many of his decisions. For him, the real success of an invention came when it solved a problem that made people safer or made their lives easier. Life in Cleveland was not without challenges. Even in the North, racism was still present. African Americans were often denied opportunities, paid less than white workers, and pushed aside in business. Garrett faced discrimination, but he did not allow it to stop him. Instead, he built a reputation through hard work. People began to trust him as a repairman and later as a businessman. His skills made him valuable, and slowly, he began to rise. By his 20s, Garrett Morgan was not just a repairman, he was an entrepreneur. He opened a small tailoring business with his wife, Mary. They used sewing machines to make clothing, and the shop became a success. This gave Garrett more confidence and more freedom to explore his inventive ideas. What made Garrett different was not just his technical skill, but his mindset. He saw the world as a place full of problems waiting to be solved. Where others saw limitations, Garrett saw opportunities. Where others accepted danger as part of life, Garrett believed safety could be improved. His heart and mind worked together. He cared about people, and he cared about progress. Looking back, it is clear that the seeds of greatness were planted in these early years. Garrett's childhood struggles, his limited education, his move to Cleveland, and his success as a young businessman all shaped him into a man who would one day change the world. His story is not just about inventions. It is about courage. It is about vision. It is about refusing to accept the limits society tried to place on him. As Garrett Morgan's life moved forward, he would soon face new challenges, disasters, risks, and the possibility of being ignored by history. But before those moments, his early life had already proven one thing: no matter where you start, determination can carry you to places you never imagined. This was the beginning of Garrett Morgan. A boy from Kentucky, born with nothing but curiosity, who dared to dream bigger than the world allowed. By the early 1900s, Garrett Morgan was no longer just a repairman. He had built a reputation in Cleveland as a skilled businessman and inventor. His sewing machine shop had grown, and his tailoring business with his wife was doing well. But Garrett was never satisfied with small successes. He always wanted to solve bigger problems, problems that could save lives. One of the biggest dangers of the time was fire. Factories, homes, and public buildings often caught fire, and firefighters had very few tools to protect themselves. Smoke filled the air, and many firefighters died not from flames, but from breathing in toxic fumes. Garrett thought about this problem. He asked himself a simple but powerful question: what if there was a way to help people breathe in dangerous situations? In 1914, Garrett created a device he called the safety hood. This invention was the first version of what we now know as the gas mask. It was simple but effective. The safety hood covered the head and used a system of tubes and filters that allowed the wearer to breathe cleaner air. Garrett designed it to protect firefighters and rescue workers from smoke, dust, and poisonous gases. At first, many people doubted the invention. Some laughed at the idea. But Garrett believed in it. He knew it worked, and he wanted to prove it. So he began giving demonstrations. He would walk into smoke-filled rooms wearing the safety hood, and he would come out unharmed. People were impressed, but still, not everyone took him seriously. Then came the day that would prove Garrett's genius to the world. In 1916, a terrible disaster struck Cleveland. A group of workers was digging a tunnel under Lake Erie. Suddenly, an explosion ripped through the tunnel, filling it with toxic smoke and gas. Several workers were trapped underground. Rescuers tried to go in, but they were quickly overcome by the fumes. The situation looked hopeless. When Garrett heard about the disaster, he knew what had to be done. He gathered his brothers and his safety hoods. Without hesitation, they went to the site. While others stood back in fear, Garrett put on his invention and went into the tunnel. The air was heavy and choking. The tunnel was dark and filled with smoke. But Garrett kept going. With the help of his brothers, he pulled injured workers out of the tunnel and brought them to safety. Thanks to his invention, lives were saved that day. The story of the Lake Erie rescue spread quickly. Newspapers covered it, and people praised the bravery of the rescuers. But when reporters discovered that Garrett Morgan, a black man, was the inventor of the safety hood, the tone of the coverage changed. Some newspapers refused to give him credit. Others minimized his role. In a time of deep racism, many people simply could not accept that a black man had invented something so important. Despite the prejudice, Garrett's invention proved its worth. Fire departments began buying the safety hood. Eventually, the U.S. military took notice. During World War I, thousands of soldiers used gas masks inspired by Garrett Morgan's design. His invention helped protect them from deadly chemical attacks on the battlefield. This was a turning point in Garrett's life. His invention had saved countless lives, yet he was not celebrated the way he deserved. While white inventors were often given awards and recognition, Garrett faced silence, and sometimes even hostility. The world wanted his ideas but not his face or his name. But Garrett did not give up. He had seen how powerful his ideas could be. He knew he had the ability to make the world safer. The safety hood was just the beginning. The invention also revealed something important about Garrett's character. He was not motivated by money or fame. He did not wait for others to act when lives were at risk. Instead, he stepped forward, risking his own safety to prove his invention worked. His courage and his compassion made him not only an inventor but also a true hero. Still, Garrett Morgan's journey was far from easy. After the gas mask, he would continue to face discrimination and setbacks. But his determination remained unshaken. His mind was always working, always searching for solutions to the problems he saw around him. The world was entering a new age of technology. Cars were becoming more common, cities were growing, and streets were filling with traffic. Garrett began to notice another danger that no one else seemed to take seriously: the growing problem of road safety. Just as he had once asked how to help people breathe in smoke, Garrett now asked himself a new question: how can we make the streets safer for everyone? That question would lead to his next great invention, one that would change the way people traveled forever. After proving his genius with the gas mask, Garrett Morgan could have stopped inventing. He had already saved countless lives, and his place in history should have been secure. But Garrett was not satisfied. His mind never rested. He kept searching for problems that needed solutions, and in the 1920s, he found one that touched the lives of millions. By this time, the automobile had transformed American life. Cars were no longer toys for the rich. They were becoming affordable, and the streets of Cleveland, like many cities, were crowded with cars, bicycles, horse-drawn wagons, and people on foot. Streets were dangerous. Accidents were common. Many people died or were badly hurt simply trying to cross the road. At most intersections, traffic signals were very simple. They had only two commands: stop and go. When the light turned green, cars sped forward. When it turned red, they slammed to a halt. But there was no warning between the two signals. Drivers often guessed, and pedestrians took risks. The result was chaos. One day, Garrett witnessed a terrible accident. Two vehicles collided at an intersection, leaving people injured and the street blocked. He watched the confusion, the fear, and the damage. In that moment, he knew something had to change. Garrett began to think. What if there was a way to warn people before the light switched from go to stop? What if drivers had a few seconds to prepare instead of being forced to act instantly? That pause, he believed, could save lives. In 1923, Garrett Morgan designed a new kind of traffic signal. His system added a third position between stop and go. It was a warning phase, a chance for drivers and pedestrians to get ready. Today, we know it as the yellow light. This idea may seem simple, but at the time, it was revolutionary. The yellow signal brought order to the streets. It gave drivers time to slow down safely, and it gave pedestrians a moment to step back. It was a small change with a huge impact. Garrett patented his design and installed it at busy intersections in Cleveland. Drivers and pedestrians quickly saw the difference. Accidents went down. Traffic flowed more smoothly. People felt safer. Soon, other cities wanted Garrett's traffic signal. The demand grew so quickly that he sold the rights to General Electric for $40,000, an enormous sum in the 1920s, worth nearly $700,000 today. For Garrett, the money was important, but what mattered most was that his invention was saving lives every single day. The traffic signal became one of the most widely used safety devices in the world. Over time, it spread across America and beyond. Today, nearly every country on Earth uses the system Garrett Morgan helped create. His idea still protects billions of drivers and pedestrians around the globe. But just like with his gas mask, Garrett's name was often forgotten. Many people used his invention without ever knowing who designed it. Schoolbooks rarely mentioned him. Recognition went to larger companies or to history itself, while Garrett remained in the shadows. Still, he did not let this discourage him. Garrett was proud of what he had done. He knew that even if people ignored his name, they could not erase his work. The world was safer because of him. That was enough. Garrett Morgan's traffic signal was more than just a device. It was a symbol of his way of thinking. He saw problems not as barriers but as opportunities. Where others saw danger and chaos, Garrett saw a solution waiting to be built. His invention of the yellow light showed his unique ability to combine compassion with practicality. He cared about people's safety, and he had the skills to protect it. By the mid-1920s, Garrett had already changed the world twice. First, he gave people a way to breathe in deadly environments. Then, he gave them a way to move safely through the streets. Few inventors can claim to have such a direct and lasting impact on daily life. But Garrett's story did not end there. His inventive spirit continued, and his role as a leader in his community grew stronger. He believed that progress was not only about machines, but also about lifting up people. He worked hard to support his community, create opportunities, and fight for recognition. Even as he achieved success, Garrett never forgot where he came from. He remembered his childhood in Kentucky, the struggles of being a black man in America, and the barriers that were placed in his path. Every invention, every achievement, was not just a victory for him but a statement. Talent, determination, and courage could break through even the strongest walls. The traffic signal was one of Garrett Morgan's greatest gifts to the world. But for him, it was only one step in a larger journey. He still had more to give, more to create, and more ways to leave a mark on history. By the time Garrett Morgan invented the traffic signal, he had already transformed two areas of modern life: safety during fires and safety on the streets. Most people would consider such achievements enough for one lifetime. But Garrett was not only an inventor. He was also a leader who wanted to make life better for his community. Garrett had experienced hardship from the moment he was born. He knew what it felt like to be pushed aside, to be ignored, and to be treated as less than others because of his race. Those experiences shaped him. They gave him not just determination but also compassion. He wanted to help people who, like him, were often forgotten by society. One of the ways he tried to help was through business. Beyond his sewing machine shop and his tailoring store, Garrett also launched a line of hair care products for African American women. At the time, black-owned businesses were rare, and mainstream companies often ignored the needs of black customers. Garrett saw an opportunity not just to make money but to serve his own community. His products were popular, and they gave him another platform to build influence. Garrett also believed in the power of information. He started a newspaper called the Cleveland Call, which later became the Call and Post. This newspaper gave African Americans in Cleveland a voice. It reported on issues that mainstream newspapers ignored, from civil rights struggles to everyday community news. For many families, Garrett's newspaper became a trusted source of information and hope. As his reputation grew, Garrett stepped further into public life. He ran for city council, showing that he wanted to represent his community not just as a businessman but as a political leader. Although he did not always win the recognition or positions he sought, his willingness to stand up inspired others. He showed people that African Americans deserved a voice in every part of society: business, media, and politics. But despite his achievements, Garrett often faced discrimination. Many white leaders refused to recognize his contributions. Even when his inventions saved lives, his name was hidden, minimized, or ignored. In schools, students learned about traffic lights and gas masks, but rarely about the man behind them. This lack of recognition was painful, but Garrett did not let it stop him. Instead, he focused on his work and his community. He believed that one day, history would remember. By the 1930s and 1940s, Garrett's health began to decline. He developed glaucoma, a disease that slowly made him lose his vision. For an inventor and a businessman who relied on his sharp eyes, this was a cruel turn of fate. Still, he continued to work as much as he could, even while losing his sight. Even in his later years, Garrett remained proud of what he had achieved. He would sometimes remind his friends and family that his inventions were not about fame or fortune but about saving lives. That, to him, was the greatest reward. And yet, while Garrett Morgan was alive, he never received the recognition he truly deserved. His inventions were used across America and the world. They became everyday parts of life. Millions of people benefited from them. But his name remained in the shadows. The reasons for this erasure were clear. In early 20th century America, racism was powerful. Black inventors, no matter how brilliant, were often ignored or denied credit. Many of their patents were bought and then rebranded under other names. Their contributions were hidden in footnotes, if they were mentioned at all. Garrett Morgan's story was no different. But his community did not forget him. In Cleveland, he was known as a leader, a businessman, a newspaper publisher, and a role model. People admired his courage, his creativity, and his generosity. Even when the larger world overlooked him, his neighbors saw his value. Garrett Morgan lived until 1963. He passed away in Cleveland at the age of 86. It was the same year that Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Garrett did not live to see the civil rights movement achieve its greatest victories, but his life was part of the long struggle for recognition and equality. Though his passing was quiet, his legacy lived on in the lives of everyone who stopped at a traffic light, or who watched a firefighter use a breathing mask. His community mourned him, and his family carried forward his story. Decades later, historians and educators would begin to restore Garrett Morgan's place in history. Schools and streets would be named after him. His face would appear in exhibits about black inventors. But during his lifetime, Garrett knew what it felt like to be forgotten by the very society he helped protect. When Garrett Morgan died in 1963, the world around him was changing. The civil rights movement was gaining strength. Marches, speeches, and protests were forcing America to confront its history of injustice. In that same year, Martin Luther King Jr. gave his "I Have a Dream" speech in Washington, D.C. Garrett did not live to see the victories of the movement, but in many ways, his life was part of the same struggle. He had spent his years fighting to be seen, to be heard, and to be remembered. At the time of his death, Garrett Morgan was not a household name. Most people used traffic signals every day. Soldiers had worn gas masks during the war. Firefighters relied on breathing devices. Yet very few knew that the man behind these life-saving inventions was a black entrepreneur from Cleveland, Ohio. His story, like the stories of many black inventors, was hidden. But history has a way of circling back. Over time, people began to rediscover Garrett Morgan's contributions. Teachers, writers, and community leaders worked to bring his name into the light. They knew that children needed to hear his story not just because of what he invented, but because of what his life represented. Garrett Morgan's legacy is not only about the gas mask or the traffic light. It is about courage. It is about resilience. It is about looking at a world filled with barriers and deciding to build anyway. His life proved that innovation does not belong only to the wealthy, the educated, or the privileged. It belongs to anyone with vision, determination, and the will to act. Today, Garrett Morgan is honored in many ways. Schools, streets, and community centers across the United States bear his name. Each one is a reminder that his genius cannot be erased. His inventions are displayed in museums, where visitors can see the original safety hood and learn about the man who risked his life to prove it worked. In 2006, he was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. This recognition came decades after his death, but it was an important step toward restoring his place in history. His name now stands among the greatest innovators of America where it has always belonged. His story is also taught during Black History Month, when students learn about pioneers whose names were once forgotten. For many young people, discovering Garrett Morgan is a powerful lesson. It shows them that even when society denies you opportunities, your ideas and your determination can still change the world. Every time a driver sees the yellow light, they are witnessing Garrett Morgan's vision. Every time a firefighter straps on a breathing device, they are using his invention. Every time a soldier puts on protective gear, they are benefiting from the courage of a man who refused to give up. His influence is everywhere, even if his name is not always spoken. But Garrett Morgan's legacy also carries a warning. It reminds us how easily history can erase voices that do not fit its preferred story. For decades, Garrett was almost invisible in textbooks and public memory. His erasure was not an accident. It was the result of racism and a society unwilling to give full credit to black inventors. Remembering Garrett Morgan is not just about celebrating one man. It is about correcting history and making sure that future generations know the truth. Garrett's life teaches us another important lesson: success is not just about inventions or wealth. It is about impact. Garrett did not chase fame. He did not design for glory. He built because he wanted to solve problems. He built because he cared about people's safety. He built because he believed in a better tomorrow. That spirit makes him more than an inventor. It makes him a hero. In the end, Garrett Morgan's legacy lives on in the simplest of moments. A child crossing the street safely. A firefighter surviving a rescue. A driver slowing down at a yellow light. These everyday acts carry his imprint. They prove that his work was never forgotten, even when his name was. Today, more people than ever know his story. They share it in classrooms, documentaries, and biographies. They tell it to remind us that genius can come from anywhere, and that even in the darkest tunnels, one person's courage can bring others back to the light. Garrett Morgan may have been ignored during his lifetime. He may have been overlooked in death. But his story, once hidden, is now rising again. And as long as people breathe, as long as people drive, as long as people fight for justice, his legacy will never die. Garrett Morgan was more than an inventor. He was a visionary. A protector. A man who built safety into the lives of millions. He was, and always will be, a forgotten genius finally remembered.